Our first speaker is a Gemini-nominated actress and mother. Her work has spanned the last 18 years in both film and television, including leading series regular roles on The Killing, where she didn't kill Rosie Larson, Judging Amy, Felicity, Century City, Drive, Tilt, and Strange World, to name a few. And she has had memorable guest starring roles on ABC's Castle, Prison Break, X-Files, among many others. Currently, she has been seen playing Detective Angie Flynn on CTV's #1 Canadian primetime, I sound like an advertisement, #1 Canadian primetime drama, Motive. Upon the birth of her son 5 years ago, she decided to move her home back here to Canada, the country she dearly loves, with the intention of making television and film she is invested in. Recently, she launched the online magazine This Fair Land to explore living a creative life in Canada and to showcase the Canadian cultural landscape that endlessly inspires her. Please welcome our first speaker, Kristin Lehman.
So I just came from set. I've got a microphone down here. I will be stepping off and going straight back to set. So I'm really happy that I could come and spend this time in the darkness with you. That is my beautiful family, and it occurs to me when I was looking through images for you that every relationship that I have that I love dearly, that's important to me, has been influenced or linked somehow to film. That's my husband. We met on a beer commercial, the institution, Canadian institution. My son, who is 5. Coincidentally, when I was 5, this was my first cinematic experience. Not unlike tonight. In the darkness, there's cool air. I felt very adult. My son is here tonight. I hope he feels adult. I remember thinking this was absolutely hilarious, and I was smitten and absolutely beguiled. I saw it in London, and I remember feeling like I was singing their national anthem. I'm a kid of the 70s, and of course, I'm very nostalgic about that time, a time before multinational corporations and international corporations were so fused with government and social policy, and a time when independent filmmakers could really emerge from the tumult of the 60s and flourish. And I think our Prime Minister is flourishing there. Another byproduct of being a child of the 60s is the 3 logos you see here: the Public Broadcasting Service, Electric Company, and Sesame Street. PBS, of course, was the incubator for what was originally a research experiment that involved television producers and child psychologists and researchers as to how they could capture preschoolers' attention. This is a perfect example of the films that I got to digest and really dig into. Cockabooty, A Windy Day, and The Adventures of Letterman, you might recognize. These films are not unlike the more adult versions of the adventurous and vigorous independent filmmaking that was being made by Lumet and Coppola and Spielberg. Sounds crazy, I know, but they were made by this groundbreaking couple here who basically influenced all of my relationship to visual art and film, this fusion of artifice and naturalism. That's John and Faith Hubley, and I encourage you to look for a documentary called Independent Spirit. They're Academy Award-winning animators who were the first to use jazz and improvised conversations to explore more abstract social constructs and concepts. At the top, we have an improvised conversation between Dudley Moore and Dizzy Gillespie in The Hat, where they explore international law, and on the bottom, George Burns and Martha Plimpton as Death and Mother Nature, exploring overpopulation and environmentalism. These were all hard-hitting, social, meaningful questions of the day in the 70s, and I got to digest them. This is one of my favorite films of theirs called The Hole. It's just so rich and sumptuous, mixed media, wax and paint. Again, improvised dialogue with George Matheson and Dizzy Gillespie as construction workers discussing classism and nuclear war. These are my grandparents, Ed and Beth Lehman. Look at them way up there, so big. Their living room was my soundstage. So I was influenced, obviously, by Sesame Street and the films that may ask questions of the day that were examples of the questions of the day. But in their living room, I got to really indulge my imagination. And despite the fact that they are the ones with the color television, I got exposed to black and white films. And so it was very interesting because, of course, the Hollywood studio system had collapsed. And in the 70s, right in the middle of the 70s, when I was with them so much, you had independent filmmakers that were stretching and yawning and wanting their film to mean something. And these images and characters in these kind of films that had no subtlety, no naturalism, music was music, women were women, men were men, or were they, were what I feasted on. And that, of course, is Loco, Shotzi, and Pola from How to Marry a Millionaire. Thank goodness, 3 archetypes I got to dig into. Shirley MacLaine, a woman who just, Sweet Charity, this film blew me away when I was young. These are all examples of films I watched in my grandparents' living room. A leading woman who was considered at her time not to have any warmth because her balls were too big, and frankly, I couldn't get enough of her. And so it's interesting because films like Doris Day's films had really fallen out of favor. They were passé. People just couldn't digest them anymore. They couldn't stomach them. And yet, I found, being a child of the 70s, in my real life, asking all the questions that the 70s were asking about gender and sexuality and drugs and rock and roll and social policy and integration and diversity, everything that the 60s primed us for, I had a chance to explore in studio film, which might sound strange, but I could see underneath the layers because I was a kid swimming in those waters. And these icons, Danny Kaye, Gene Kelly, all the other ones that I showed, they really were examples of my inner life reflected, people who broke into spontaneous song and dance. Joel Grey and Cabaret, 1973. This was the film that made me become an actress. It stirred me in the deepest part of my soul. And it's not surprising that this is a song and dance film, a man in drag, of course, exploring all kinds of gender things. Very much the 70s, a studio film. So Carl Jung, handsome photo. He's up there because he encouraged people to take their dreams seriously, to analyze them and respect them and try to find a way to integrate them in their conscious lives. And while I was looking for PechaKucha images, I had a dream that I was following a young man, a musician. I was following him around a party, and he finally turned around to me and he said, "Make a joyful noise." And I woke up and I thought, if it's not this quote that he's talking about to me in my dream, I don't know what it is. And it came out of me researching all these images of people who made joyful noises. And it allowed me the freedom and the bravery to get a little closer to loving the brave choice of being an actor. I find it painful. I think film and television, and acting in film and television, contains a lot of contradictions. It contains what Keats would call negative capabilities, that of the ability of an artist to hold contradictions and delve even more deeply into this rich, endless human life. I find the fusion of artifice and naturalism to be sometimes difficult, the fusion of art and commerce to be very difficult. But thankfully, I'm surrounded by tremendous people like these people you see here, my crew members on Motive, director Sturla Gunnarsson, and my camera team beside me. I'm so grateful that I get to integrate parts of my personality that I wouldn't normally have a chance to otherwise with those people. And last but not least, my husband and I do what we love and we do what we know, and we know film. And with Carol Hornland, we created this fair land where you can see, I hope, beautiful documentary filmmaking that inspires you to treat your whole life like an art. And we do it through film, photographs, and journalism. Thank you very much.